Are you the main character in the story of your life? Or are you simply an NPC, a non-player character, executing a script written by your parents, your boss, your culture? This isn't a rhetorical question. It's a diagnostic one, because many of you watching this right now are living lives of quiet desperation, following a map drawn by someone else, wondering why the destination feels so empty. You have followed the rules, climbed the ladder, and collected the trophies, yet you feel like a fraud in your own skin. Today, we are not here for fleeting motivation or feel-good platitudes. We are here for a self-audit. A brutal, necessary examination of the chains you may not even know you're wearing. I will walk you through 6 brutal signs that you are living someone else's life, and if you recognize even one of them in the mirror, consider it a fire alarm for your soul. It is time for a hard reset. My name is Cassian. For the first half of my life, I was a master architect of a life that wasn't my own. I built a tech empire based on the world's definition of success: relentless growth, market domination, and the accumulation of wealth. From the outside, I was a titan. On the inside, I was a ghost, rattling around in a gilded cage, plagued by a constant low-grade anxiety that no amount of success could silence. My crucible moment came in the form of a burnout so severe it shattered my health and a key business partnership. Stripped of my external armor, I was forced to confront the man underneath, and I found a stranger. It was in that void that I stopped looking outside for answers and began looking inward, guided by the ancient Stoics, men who commanded empires and faced exile, all while building an unbreachable fortress within their own minds. This is what I offer you. Not a map, but a compass. The tools to think, not a script of what to think. The goal here is ruthless self-honesty, leading to actionable steps that will allow you to forge what I call an iron mind, a mind that is sovereign, deliberate, and unbreakable in the face of external chaos. So, take a breath. The process we are about to begin is uncomfortable. It is supposed to be. True growth does not happen in the comfort zone. It happens at the edge of your resistance. We begin now. The first and most insidious sign is what I call chronic validation addiction. This is the deep, nagging need for external approval to feel a sense of internal worth. You live your life on a stage, constantly glancing at the audience for their reaction. Your mood soars with every like, every compliment, every promotion. And it plummets into a dark abyss with the slightest criticism, a negative comment, or the feeling of being ignored. You do not make decisions based on your own principles, you make them based on a poll of perceived opinions. Your values become a weather vane, spinning frantically in the winds of social expectation. This is not living, it is performing, and it is exhausting. I once mentored a young founder, a brilliant engineer who had created a truly disruptive piece of software. In the early days, he was driven by the pure joy of building. But once the first wave of media attention hit, something shifted. He became obsessed. He spent hours a day tracking social media mentions, reading every article and measuring his self-worth by the volume of the applause. His decisions became reactive. Instead of focusing on the long-term integrity of his product, he began chasing short-term PR wins to feed his addiction. His crucible came when a prominent tech journalist wrote a scathing and, frankly unfair, critique of his company. He didn't see it as a business problem, he experienced it as a complete annihilation of his identity. He spiraled. The company nearly went under, not because the criticism was fatal, but because the leader's sense of self was built on a foundation of sand. The great Stoic teacher Epictetus gave us the most powerful tool to combat this: the dichotomy of control. He stated that some things are up to us, and some things are not. Your actions, your character, your judgments, these are yours to command. The applause, the criticism, the opinions of others, these are fundamentally not up to you. To chain your inner peace to something you cannot control is to sentence yourself to a life of emotional servitude. The practical application is this: for 1 week, conduct an approval audit. At the end of each day, identify one decision you made. Then ask yourself, was this choice made to align with my own values, or was it made in anticipation of someone else's approval? Do not judge the answer. Just observe the pattern. The goal is not to stop caring what others think, but to stop needing it to know your own value. Are you defining your worth by your character, or are you outsourcing it to the unpredictable whims of the crowd? The second sign is a close cousin to the first, but more subtle in its deception. I call it identity accommodation syndrome. This isn't just seeking approval, it's actively molding your personality to fit the expectations of whatever room you're in. You become a social chameleon, changing your colors, your interests, even your stated beliefs, to ensure you blend in seamlessly. You have a work self, a friend self, and a family self, and you fear what would happen if they ever met. You suppress a genuine passion because your social circle deems it weird. You bite your tongue on a core conviction during a family dinner to avoid ruffling any feathers. Each time you do this, you carve away a small piece of your authentic self, leaving you feeling fragmented and hollow. Early in my tech career, I desperately wanted to secure funding from a prestigious venture capital firm. The partners were all cut from the same cloth: Ivy League, old money, and obsessed with golf and sailing, two things about which I knew nothing and cared less. Yet, for months, I became an actor. I bought a subscription to Golf Digest. I learned the jargon. I spent a small fortune on a set of clubs and spent miserable weekends hacking away at a driving range. I would sit in meetings, nodding along to conversations about regattas and country clubs, feeling like a complete imposter. I was accommodating my identity to their world. The irony is, they didn't fund my company. They saw through the facade. Not because they knew I didn't like golf, but because a man who is not comfortable in his own skin does not project the kind of conviction needed to lead a company. The real loss wasn't the funding, it was the erosion of my own self-respect. The emperor-philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the goal of a good life is to live according to nature. This is often misinterpreted as living in the woods. What it truly means is to live in accordance with your own nature, your authentic, rational, and virtuous self. To be a chameleon is to live in direct opposition to this principle. The practical exercise here is the 1% authenticity rule. Identify one area of your life where you consistently wear a mask. This week, make a conscious choice to reveal just 1% of your true self in that setting. It doesn't have to be a grand confession. If you hate corporate jargon, stop using it in one meeting. If you love science fiction but your friends only talk about sports, mention a fascinating book you're reading. It will feel risky, but you are not testing their acceptance. You are testing your own courage to be yourself. Reflect on this. Where in your life are you hiding parts of yourself for the price of admission into a group? What is that ticket costing your soul? Let's move to the third sign, a state of self-imposed servitude I call people-pleasing paralysis. This is the chronic inability to say no. Your days are not your own. They are a patchwork quilt of other people's priorities. You overcommit, you stretch yourself thin, and you find yourself filled with a quiet resentment for the very people you're trying to please. This isn't born of kindness, it's born of fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as selfish or not a team player. You believe that your value is tied to your utility to others, and so you hand over your most precious, non-renewable resource, your time, to anyone who asks for it. The result is a life lived in service of everyone's agenda but your own. I coached a brilliant woman, a mid-level manager at a logistics company, who was the very embodiment of this paralysis. She was competent, kind, and utterly drowning. Her team delegated upwards to her. Her boss gave her extra projects because she always delivered, and her colleagues would pass off their difficult tasks, knowing she wouldn't refuse. She came to me on the verge of a complete breakdown, working 70-hour weeks, her health failing, and her family life in tatters. She said, "Cassian, I feel like my life is a cup that everyone drinks from, but no one ever refills." In her mind, saying no was an act of aggression. We had to reframe it. Saying no to a non-essential request is saying yes to your essential work, to your health, to your family, to your sanity. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote extensively on the brevity of life. He admonished us for guarding our money and property so fiercely, yet giving away our time, our very life force, as if it were worthless. People-pleasing is the ultimate squandering of this finite resource. The antidote is to practice setting deliberate boundaries. Here is a simple, practical habit. The strategic pause. The next time someone makes a request that you instinctively want to say yes to out of obligation, do not respond immediately. Instead, say, "Thank you for thinking of me. Let me check my schedule and my priorities, and I will get back to you by the end of the day." This pause does two things. It breaks the compulsive yes reflex, and it gives you the space to rationally assess the request against your own goals. It allows you to move from a place of emotional reaction to a place of logical response. Ask yourself this tonight. When was the last time you said yes with your mouth while every fiber of your being was screaming, "No"? What were you truly afraid of in that moment? The fourth sign is one of the most dangerous because it often feels comfortable. It is the pattern of passive living. This is life on autopilot. You wake up, you follow a routine, you react to the demands of the day, and you go to sleep. Weeks, months, and then years blur into a monotonous landscape. You are not actively steering your life, you are a passenger in a vehicle driven by habit and circumstance. The symptoms are subtle. A feeling of emotional numbness, a sense that you're just going through the motions, a lack of any real excitement or purpose. You're not unhappy, necessarily. You're just not there. You are reacting to life, not creating it. My own life before my burnout was a masterclass in passive living, disguised as hyperproductivity. My calendar was my commander. My inbox set my agenda. My day was a relentless series of reactions. React to a market downturn, react to a competitor's move, react to an employee's problem, react to an investor's demand. I thought that being busy was the same as being in control. In reality, I had ceded control to external forces. I hadn't made a truly conscious, deliberate decision about the direction of my own life in years. I was like a sailor who is so busy patching leaks and adjusting ropes that he never once looks at the compass or chooses a destination. I was adrift, mistaking the motion of the waves for progress. The Stoics held a concept called prohairesis, which translates roughly to our capacity for reasoned choice, our volition, our will. They believed this was the core of our humanity, the internal faculty that allows us to make deliberate judgments and choices, independent of external events. To live on autopilot is to neglect this faculty. It is to live as less than a fully conscious human being. To reclaim this, you must shift from reaction to intention. The most effective tool for this is the decision audit. For 1 week, at the end of each day, write down the 3 most significant things you did that day. Next to each one, label it as either an intention or a reaction. The results will be illuminating and perhaps alarming. The goal is to slowly, deliberately, shift the balance from a life of reaction to a life of intention. Look back on your day today. Were your actions the result of conscious choices you made this morning? Or were they a series of automatic responses to the demands placed upon you? Are you the architect of your day, or just its janitor? This brings us to the 5th sign, fear-based decision-making. This is the invisible prison that keeps so many people locked in lives they don't want. Every major decision is filtered through one primary question: what will people think? You avoid risk not because it's unwise, but because you fear the judgment that comes with failure. You don't speak up in a meeting with a good idea because you fear looking foolish. You don't start the business, learn the skill, or take the trip because you are paralyzed by the imagined criticism of others. You are living your life to please a hypothetical jury that exists only in your head. You are playing it safe, and in doing so, you are guaranteeing a life of mediocrity and regret. I remember being in my early 30s, flush with the success of my first company. A brilliant but eccentric engineer came to me with an idea that was, at the time, radical. It was a high-risk, high-reward concept that would have required me to pivot my entire business model. I saw the potential, but my first thought wasn't about the market or the technology. It was, what will my board say? What will my investors think? What will the industry press right if this blows up in my face? The fear of their judgment was a physical weight. I passed on the idea. A competitor, led by someone with more courage, launched a similar product 2 years later and created a whole new category. My failure to act haunted me for a decade, far more than any business failure I ever experienced. The pain of regret is always heavier than the pain of failure. Epictetus taught that we are not disturbed by events, but by the views we take of them. The fear of judgment is a perfect example. The judgment itself is just words, an external event completely outside your control. It has no power. The power comes from the story you tell yourself about that judgment. You are not a prisoner of other people's opinions, you are a prisoner of your fear of their opinions. To break free, you must practice what I call voluntary discomfort. Start small. Intentionally do something that might attract minor, harmless judgment. Wear something slightly out of your comfort zone. Voice a dissenting, yet respectful opinion in a low-stakes meeting. The goal is to build your immunity to the opinions of others, to realize that the sky does not fall. You learn to separate the event from your judgment about it. Think of one important thing you have not done in the last year. Now, ask yourself with brutal honesty, was the decision not to act based on a rational assessment of risk, or was it based on the fear of what someone else might think? Finally, we arrive at the sixth and most profound sign: values disconnection. This is when the life you are living is in fundamental conflict with the principles you hold, or should hold, most dear. You find yourself making decisions that leave a sour taste in your mouth. You work for a company whose mission you don't believe in. You engage in gossip or office politics that violate your sense of integrity. You pursue goals like wealth or status, only to find that achieving them brings no fulfillment. This creates a deep inner schism, a constant, low-grade civil war within your own soul. It is the feeling of being profoundly lost, of navigating with a compass that is pointing to someone else's true north. I once worked with a senior banking executive, a man who, by all external measures, was at the pinnacle of success. He had the corner office, the 8-figure income, the perfect family, but he was miserable, suffering from insomnia and a quiet sense of despair. He came to me because his life felt, in his words, like a beautiful, intricate lie. Through our sessions, we conducted a values audit. He wrote down the values his life currently represented: prestige, financial accumulation, and corporate power. Then I asked him to write down the values he truly admired and wished to embody. He wrote creativity, autonomy, and service to others. The chasm between the two lists was the source of his entire misery. He was living his company's values, his industry's values, perhaps even his father's values. But he had completely betrayed his own. The work wasn't about changing his job overnight, it was about starting to build small bridges across that chasm. He started by mentoring young entrepreneurs on the side for free, reconnecting with his value of service. It was the first time he'd felt genuine purpose in years. Marcus Aurelius gave himself a powerful command in his private journal: never value anything as profitable to yourself that shall compel you to break your promise, to lose your self-respect, to hate any man, to suspect, to curse, to act the hypocrite, to desire anything that needs walls and curtains. This is the ultimate test of values alignment. Are your daily actions things you can be proud of, Or do they require walls and curtains to hide them from the world, or from yourself? The practical exercise is values clarification. Take out a piece of paper. Write down what you believe your top 3 values are. Not aspirational values, but the principles you want to live by starting today. Integrity, freedom, family, growth, courage. Be specific. For the next week, at the end of each day, look at your main actions and ask, did my behavior today honor these 3 values? This simple audit will reveal the disconnect with undeniable clarity. If your life were a company, what would its mission statement be? And are your daily operations, the choices you make every hour, actually serving that mission? We have now dissected the 6 signs. You have audited your addiction to validation, your tendency to accommodate, your paralysis in pleasing others, your passive routines, your fear-based decisions, and your disconnection from your core values. Seeing the truth is the first, most difficult step. Now comes the work of reclaiming your direction. This is not about a massive overnight transformation. It is about small, deliberate course corrections, practiced daily, that compound over time into a new destiny. It is about forging the iron mind. Here is your framework for action. First, daily introspection. For the next 30 days, end each day with a 5-minute reflection in a journal. Ask yourself one question. Which of my decisions today were truly mine, and which were scripted by others? Do not judge. Simply observe. Awareness is the dawn of change. Second, boundary practice. Your no is a muscle. It must be exercised. This week, identify one small, low-stakes request to which you would normally say yes out of obligation and say, "No, I can't commit to that right now." Notice the discomfort. Sit with it. It is the feeling of you reclaiming your own territory. Now, for your challenge. This is where insight becomes action. I want you to identify one single external influence, a specific person's expectation, a social norm you follow, or a cultural script that is dominating a part of your life. It could be the pressure from your family to follow a certain career path, or the unspoken rule among your friends that you must always be available. This week, your mission is to perform one small, deliberate act of defiance against that influence. If it's pressure to work late, leave on time one day this week. If it's the expectation that you always agree, voice one respectful, dissenting opinion. This act is not for them. It is for you. It is a declaration of your own sovereignty. When you do it, I want you to document the internal resistance you feel, the fear, the guilt, the anxiety. Write it down. Then write down how you acted anyway. This is the raw material of an iron mind. If you are serious about this work, then your commitment must be made tangible. In the comments below, I want you to declare which of the 6 signs hit you the hardest. This is not for me, it's for you. It's an act of brutal honesty and public accountability. Then, state your commitment to the weekly challenge. Join the others who are choosing to stop being NPCs in their own lives and are starting the hard work of becoming the author of their own story. The path to an unbreakable inner citadel begins not with a grand gesture, but with a single, conscious choice. Make it now.